Recently, the Supreme Court Collegium in India recommended the appointment of a senior advocate as a judge of the Delhi High Court. Once approved, the Delhi High Court will get its first openly gay judge in the courts of law. In light of this, Subathra and I discuss on the legal status and rights of the LGBTQ community in India.
So before we discuss the legal aspects, we would like to take the viewers into certain phrases for their better understanding. First aspect is, who is a heterosexual? Now, any person who is either romantically or sexually attracted to the person from the opposite gender. Next is, who is a homosexual? Any person who is either romantically or sexually attracted to the person of the same gender.
Right.
So the most often acronym is the LGBTQ. So I'm going to explain what it is. That is nothing but a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and more. Now, who is a lesbian? So lesbian is a woman who is either romantically or sexually attracted to another woman. Gay is nothing but a man who is same way romantically or sexually attracted to a man as such. Bisexual is a person who is romantically or sexually attracted to both genders.
Right.
Transgender is a person whose gender does not match with the gender at birth. So either a person can be born as a male, identifies himself as a female, or it can be vice versa. There are also other identities such as queer, intersexual, asexual that are also considered as inclusive under the LGBTQ.
Right. We now look at the historical and legal background relating to these rights. Section 377, Chapter 16 of the Indian Penal Code, or IPC 1860, and I quote the phrases verbatim. The section considered any voluntary sexual intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal was punishable. And now the punishments ranged and included fines and imprisonment ranging from 10 years to about life imprisonment.
Yeah.
Basically, what the section implied in so many words, the important phrase there was against the order of nature. So, same gender sexual intercourse was considered against the order of nature and unnatural, and hence a criminal offense. Now, this was, unfortunately, this was the only known legal provision that dealt with same gender unisons and also ended up criminalizing it. While this was there on one side, there was Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which dealt with the right to equality. Section 377 of the IPC was enacted in 1860, whereas the Indian Constitution came much later, and both were in direct contrast to one another.
So now let us see what are the legal aspects which are being dealt with the LGBTQ, especially the cases which are of late taken up by various courts. So the first and the earliest known case in India was in 2009, which was the NAS Foundation versus the government of NCT Delhi. So NAS Foundation is actually an NGO. It's an India trust which filed a petition in the Delhi High Court praying to repeal the part of the section of 377 that criminalized homosexual activity. So here the NGO actually sought to legalize the homosexual intercourse between consenting adults. This was a great initiative which was taken up then in 2009 itself. And the main contentions being that Section 377 is a very archaic law and which has been enacted more than 1.5 centuries ago during the British era, and it is not keeping with this changing social times.
Correct.
Further, The section itself is very vague and arbitrary, leaving interpretations which are open to law enforcement authorities, for such as the police, etc. Consequently, what has happened, the LGBT community was subjected to a lot of harassment and abuse using section 377 as a pretext.
Right.
So this was violative of the fundamental rights which are being guaranteed by the Article 14, which is the right to equality. Article 15, which is non-discrimination on grounds of gender, plus Article 19, which says right to privacy, and Article 21, which is the right to life, which is very, very important of the Indian Constitution.
That's right.
So, after due consideration, the Division Bench of the Delhi High Court has passed a landmark judgment, and this landmark decision legalized consensual homosexual acts between adults in private. So, the non-consensual physical relations with minors, adults, continue to remain a criminal offense.
Subathra, you had just mentioned that the earliest case was in 2009, and the NAS Foundation case had decriminalized homosexual activity between consenting adults. However, at that point, the judgment was very short-lived because in 2013, there was a case, Suresh Kumar Kaushal versus NAS Foundation. So one Mr. Suresh Kumar, he actually filed a special leave petition in the Supreme Court, stating that the judgment given by the Delhi High Court, setting aside part of Section 377, was arbitrary in nature. On the grounds that it violated Article 14, it was very arbitrary in nature. Now, there were a few submissions that were made. Primary submission that was made was any change to or an amendment or a repeal or abolishment to a section or part of it should actually be made by the parliament which enacts the laws and not by the courts. That was one submission. Secondly, to the point that, you know, the section was being misused by law enforcement authorities such as police, where the LGBT community was being harassed, tortured, abused also. It was felt that just because a section is being prone to being misused for reason of misinterpretation, it cannot be held to be unconstitutional. While the Apex Court also felt and also took into consideration that the LGBT community, it was a very minuscule percentage of the total Indian population. And the prosecutions over almost 158, 160 years were hardly between 100 and 200. So for such a minuscule population, there was no need to have abolished a law. So on these three primary counts, the Supreme Court actually set aside the Delhi High Court order. So effectively what happened, what was decriminalized, was recriminalized again. So effectively what happened was homosexual acts were now considered a criminal offense on and from 2013.
So there were several attempts by the government periodically to address this issue in the parliament as such. But however, it did not materialize to a large extent. But eventually in 2018, the entire landscape for the LGBTQ changed when the Apex Court produced a very landmark judgment, which was in the writ petition of Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India and others. So it is a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court which considered the submission that gender identity, sexual orientation, sexual acts between consenting adults are intrinsic to one's personality and it's matter of complete personal choice. I think this is a beautiful judgment which has been given by the Apex Court, and any consensual carnal intercourse between consenting adults in private which does not in any way harm the public decency or morality should not be criminalized as it is violative of the fundamental rights to equality, protection from discrimination which is guaranteed under the Indian Constitution.
Right.
And the bench also was of the view that the constitutional morality must prevail over the social morality.
Absolutely.
So the bench has taken into a complete consideration not anywhere to overstep between the constitutional aspect as well as the morality aspect. And the bench was also of the view that the grounds which are being taken by the Supreme Court, it abolished the part of Section 377 that criminalized sexual acts between consenting adults.
Right.
However, the part of the section that criminalizes unnatural sex acts against minors and animals such as sodomy and bestiality continue to remain under 377. So this truly is a landmark judgment in the Indian legal history as such, giving a lot of breathing space and liberty to the LGBTQ.
Right. You know, it's been a little over 4 years since the historic judgment, abolishing a part of Section 377 that decriminalized homosexual encounters between consenting adults. It's been 4 years, but it's been just the beginning of a long, long journey for them. One might think that since the judgment has come, their lives have become better, whether they have any challenges at all. But what are the challenges? There are several challenges. See, for starters, the LGBT community does not constitute only of people with varied sexual orientation. It also includes people who have a gender identity issue per se. For instance, transgenders. As you had mentioned in the definition, the transgender was born a gender, something else at the time of his or her birth, but identified the opposite gender, right? Queers. All of them also form a part of the LGBT community. Now, the challenge here is, while a very minuscule section of them are born into affluent families where they are accepted, where there's a lot of understanding, it's not like everyone has a rough story, but majority of them come from very deprived backgrounds. They are disowned by families, they are harassed, and the worst form of discrimination, they're abused, sexually tortured, and out of no choice end up taking to begging or prostitution to just earn a livelihood. Now the challenge here is this. Way back in 2014, the Supreme Court had passed another landmark judgment identifying transgenders as a third gender. Okay, but and also passed a mandate saying they have to be treated as socially and economically backward. In fact, in 2019, there was a transgender people's protection bill which came into effect in 2020. But the ground reality is very little has changed other than just putting their names as the third gender in application forms.
So apart from what you have said, also Sandhya, I would like to add that the IPC also contains several provisions which relate to rape, violence, cybercrime, stalking, voyeurism, etc. And also there are acts like POSH. All of them deal with only the traditional man-woman identity as such.
Right.
So these laws also must be made more gender neutral to accommodate the LGBTQ communities as well. And it is also essential to know that even corporates should have more gender neutral laws in their HR department, which will also give the equal right to all the kind of community people, and they become more and more involved and inclusive.
Right. Subathra, you were speaking about more inclusiveness, especially of the transgenders in the corporate sector and across various sectors of the society. I would also like to add here that while same gender unisons between consenting adults has been recognized, unfortunately, same gender marriages has not been legally recognized in India still. There are a few other countries that have, but currently in India, it is not recognized. Okay. So consequently, it goes that they do not have the right to adopt, or they either through surrogacy or adoption. And those rights have not been recognized. In fact, I think for, same gender couples are one of the fit candidates to adopt, either through surrogacy or otherwise. And because obviously, because they can't have children naturally of their own. So those are issues, again, which need definite legal address for the betterment of the LGBT community. Subhadra, former Justice Indu J. Malhotra, one of the judges in the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court that abolished part of Section 377, actually made a beautiful statement in the course of the judgment. I quote, "Homosexuality is not an aberration, but a variation of sexuality," unquote. That's what she said. I believe at the very core of human rights is the fact that all human beings are equal. Just as law says, and even socially we say, we cannot discriminate basis on race, caste, color, creed, religion. Similarly, I think it is incorrect to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or sexual preference, simply because it's to each their own. It's a very personal feeling, right?
Absolutely.
And to actually gender discriminate or discriminate based on that will be violative of all the fundamental rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution of India. Right?
True. So it is the person's merit, efficiency, and the professional capabilities that should decide their growth and prosperity. Their personal choices should not matter as long as they are personal.
Absolutely.
So we hope that the viewers have found this episode informative. And we would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year ahead.
I join Subhadra in wishing the same. See you on the other side of the new year. Bye.
Bye.